Well, it's been quite a while since the last review. October was not an intentional sabbatical, I'll be perfectly honest. It just happened that way. Had a number of activities, and every single weekend was nearly booked. And, I got a lot of catching up to do at this point in time, and I have much to complete before the year wraps. So, in order to accomplish both of those, I'm going to start off by bringing you the very first Bleeding Edge twofer or double shot or whichever you want to call it. So get comfy for two reviews. Innerdeeps, the debut of Royal Sorrow, and the eighth album from Lunatic's Soul, The World Under Unsun. Coming right up. Hey, Prognoggins, Dave here. This is Bleeding Edge. I'm not even going to say weekly album review because it's been since September 24th since I did my last post that wasn't basically a post mourning the loss of somebody important in my life. Just been one of those kinds of months. It got a little bit away from me. It wasn't intended to be that long, but a bunch of things happened. I won't even get into all of them and bore you with that. But I'm back, and I have set myself quite the task. I've got 5, maybe 6 reviews I want to get done before the end of November. Because once we get into December, it's Christmas season, but it's also year-end list season. And I might have a couple other things I want to try to get done between now and then. So hang tight. I've got a lot I want to do. And I've got 2 albums here I'm bringing to you today. So I'm going to do my best to keep it brief with these. I'm not going to get in quite to the level of detail that I normally do. But I'm going to try and give you, the brief version. Let's see if I'm capable of doing that. Anyway, we start off new band, Royal Sorrow, young guys who have been playing instruments and playing together for most of their life, debuting their first album, of course, with Innerdeeps, and they were so impressive they got signed to Inside Out Records right away. That's no small feat. I got to say, that's kind of a big deal when you are a new band and you're already signed up with one of the premier record labels in the world, but certainly the premier record label for progressive rock. So the band is made up of some young bucks. We've got Markus Hentunen on vocals and guitars. We have Eero Maihala on bass and Jana Miskonen, there we go, on drums. Sorry, guys, if I got any of those wrong. There's a very high probability I did, but what do you got to do? And believe it or not, new guys on the block, they produce their own album. That's not necessarily an odd thing these days. A lot of up-and-comers who are self-producing albums, maybe not on major labels, but it's not a new thing in the world. These guys have a bit of a pedigree that comes with them, and it shows. But before we start getting into the breakdowns, going to very quickly tell you what my methodology is. If you're not familiar, if you're new here, break each album down into 4 categories: intellectual, innovative, technical, and emotional. And then I rate them on a 1 to 5 scale for each of those, average that out. Then I might be adding a personal enjoyment modifier, add or subtract one way or the other, depending on exactly whether or not that average, that raw score, matches my personal experience of the album. While we're getting ready to do that, though, if you could, take a moment, like, subscribe. Well, hold off till liking until you get to the end of the video. Maybe you won't like what I say. But if you could subscribe ahead of time, if you're into this kind of thing, would love to have you along for the ride. So, here we start with Royal Sorrow, Innerdeeps. And of course, as always, we start off with intellectual. Now, in brief, this is definitely a smart album. This is a very well-written, great phrasing, high concepts, a lot of philosophy and themes of personal growth and life experience and things like that. It definitely brings up some nice concepts and some nice ideas, and really impressed with the way they phrase this out and the way they pull it together. It flows so nicely in the songs, despite the fact that these aren't little short snippets of thoughts. These are full-on sentences in many ways, and you don't always get that in albums. So I'm very impressed with that. These guys seem to be wise beyond their years for young folks. So I'm going to score that a 4. Moving on to innovative. Now, I'm going to be frank, there's nothing that I would call especially innovative going on here. It is absolutely expertly crafted. These guys are absolutely highly talented on their instruments. The music itself is hard hitting, it is melodic, and it's definitely interesting, and it is highly polished. We'll talk about that in a little bit. I would put it probably in the vein of like Architects or Monuments, Spirit Box, maybe with a bit of Vola in there. Mostly clean vocals, very sparing use of harsh vocals, but the breakdowns are super heavy. The melodicism is there. It's all very catchy, and it's got a nice kind of pop ear for it, style to it, in the sense that it catches. They've got some pretty serious hooks, but it's definitely heavy, jagged, and melodic, modern prog tinged metal. It doesn't, sort of like those other bands, doesn't quite fully immerse itself in the world of prog, but the chops are absolutely there, and the intricacy of the music definitely talks about prog. Now, at the same time, does that mean that there's anything that they are bringing especially new to the table or especially new to the world? Not really. And it's their first album, so I have nothing to compare it against as far as their own growth as a band or their evolution as a band. So I'm going to rate this a 3. Now, moving on to technical, very impressively played. Really just what you would expect to hear from what I guess is it a stretch to call them musical prodigies? Doesn't seem like it. These guys seem to have been playing together for quite some time and really built their chops before putting out a first album. And it really shows in the product. There's not a note out of place. The arrangements are interesting. I wouldn't say there's a lot of room left open for improvisation, but there's absolutely space for some tasty licks and some tasteful instrumental passages and some bits there of not quite soloing, or maybe it is soloing in the vein of something along the lines of more David Gilmour, where it's not sure if it was improvised or if it was written as it was, but definitely nicely crafted is what I would say. So technically, these guys have some serious chops. I'm going to give them a 4.25. I'm not sure they showed us everything they can do on this album, but they showed a lot. Moving on to emotional, you know what it's been for me all year. There's not a lot that really gets my heart to skip a beat here and there. And once again, there's nothing here that jumps out at me. It's really solid stuff, and I think they play for an emotional component, but it just didn't quite connect with me entirely. With all that instrumental precision and the intellectual lyrics, there's generally usually not much room left for strong emotional content as well. It takes takes an interesting artist and a very talented artist to pull those together convincingly, and very few actually do it, at least as far as my ear goes. I do think that the melodies tend to contain a lot of the emotional content, and they can jack some things up here and there. So I'm going to give these guys a 3.5, which is above average for me when I score bands, as you may know. So there we go. We put it all together. We've got 4 for intellectual, 3 for innovative, 4.25 for technical, 3.5 for emotional. That gives us a raw score of 3.69. You know, throwing in a 0.25 here and there gets me more interesting numbers than I've been getting. My additional thoughts on this, the big question that really hangs out there for me is, when you look at all of this, it checks a lot of boxes. Powerful soaring vocals, nice vocal harmonies, powerful, heavy, melodic metal, definitely well played and definitely interesting. Some pretty highfalutin concepts at play within the lyrics. And the question is, why don't I like this better than I do? I haven't figured it out. I have turned this over in my mind for quite some time. And to be honest, there's probably part of the reason this got delayed, because I think I was procrastinating. I couldn't figure it out. I couldn't figure out what was wrong, what made me not quite want to catch this one. I don't know what it is, because I've taken note. It looks like it's gotten some pretty solid reviews out there, but something keeps me from liking this more than I do. There's a really solid product here. These guys are definitely putting out some banging music. Do I feel like it's too polished? Is it like, did it lose? Does it have too much of a pop sheen to it as far as the production? Because there definitely are layers upon layers of here. This is dense production going on here. And to a degree, Maybe it sands off some of the rough edges that I miss. And I recognize sometimes I like that. I do like a bit of grit in my music. And when things get too polished, I lived through the late 80s, man. You couldn't hardly get more polished than what was going on then, and more overproduced, to the point that it seemed like, I don't know, everything just seemed like it was covered in plastic wrap or I don't know. Anyway, I don't know if it's that. It doesn't seem like it, because it doesn't seem like it's that horribly overproduced. Is it that it's not as unique as I would like it to be? It's really good, solid music, and I think maybe to a degree. I'm not a huge fan of Architects or Monuments. I really do like a lot of their music, but like they're not one of my necessarily go-tos. So if these guys are sitting in that vein, maybe that's it. The songs are all very concise. Is that a problem for me? I don't think so. It's not usually the thing with me. I take things as they come. I don't need songs to be long to consider them prog. Is it just too catchy? Sometimes that could be it too. I don't know, but then there's a lot of catchy music I've heard in the last year and last several years that I've liked just fine. Is it all these things put together? And the answer I've come up with is, I don't fucking know. I have no clue. I have turned this over so many times, and for every argument I can think of, oh, that explains it, I can think of a counter argument that goes, but yeah, but they're not the only ones doing that. So I don't know. I got nothing. I got nothing for you. Standout tracks for me, the big ones, Let Go, really grand, powerful, heavy breakdown entrance on their part. I really dig that. Samsara, I like the philosophical. I meant to check this before I got on here, did this, so forgive me, but I think it refers to Hindu concepts and stuff like that. I'm not sure, either that or Buddhist, but I think Hindu. And I thought that was really cool, and I like the lyrical content of it and all that. And Bloodflower is another bit of a banger that I really enjoy. So in the end, yeah, I got no idea. I just know I don't feel an urge to go back to it, and yet it seems like it should be perfect for me. It is dense, well-produced, powerful, proggy metal. And yet, I'm going to knock off a negative 0.25. That's going to bring the final score for this one to 3.44 and a question mark, because I can't explain it. Anyway, so moving on to the second album. And this is very much a very different band, or very different artist, I should say, in a number of ways. This is Lunatic Soul. The album is The World Under Unsun. And if you know what Lunatic Soul is, you know it is the solo project of Marios Duda of Riverside. And when I say solo, I'm not kidding. I'm not kidding at all. He is doing everything. He is playing all the instruments. He is Bugs Bunny on a baseball field, and you got to be a certain age to get this, but I'll play it for you.
Catching, Bugs Bunny. Left field, Bugs Bunny. Right field, Bugs Bunny. Pitching, Bugs Bunny. Third base, Bugs Bunny. Center field, Bugs Bunny. First base, Bugs Bunny. Shortstop, Bugs Bunny. Second base, Bugs Bunny.
Exactly that. There are others on the album that are playing along with him as guest players. I have looked at every single name, and I am clueless on how to pronounce any of them correctly. So I'm just going to put them on the screen here, and you can see what they did and what contributions they brought to this album. So in another way, not only is this a solo project, this is a solo project by a guy who's been in the business for, 20, 25 years? He's been around. The Royal Sorrow, New Kids on the Block, and Marios Duda is the grizzled veteran. I'm going to hold off saying old, because I don't know that anybody wants to be called old. But he is the grizzled veteran who's been doing this for a long time. This is the last of an 8-part cycle spanning 8 albums. This is the 8th of those 8 albums, and all the last Lunatic Soul albums are all kind of part of this big concept he's got going on here. So, talking about life and death and toxic relationships, it is an impressively well thought out concept album, part of a series of concept albums. So, let's get breaking this one down. As you can probably guess, as we start off with an intellectual, Mario is a deep thinker. I've talked with him before, and he is definitely a philosopher bard out there playing music that he really puts a lot of intense thought into and has thoroughly thought these things through. He's also someone who, in particular on this album, I got the impression, has been using Lunatic Soul as his opportunity to break free from the constraints that he feels within Riverside and the expectations of the prog audience out there looking for him to do certain things with them. And this is his opportunity to do other things. But again, his work reflects how deep a thinker he is, regardless of whether it's Lunatic Soul or Riverside. And as I said, this is an album dealing with themes of loss, of escaping toxic relationships, of starting over, a rebirth of sorts. And the concept of Unsun is the concept of an eclipse and what that means when the sun exists, but you can't see it, but then it comes back and it's a chance to start over and all those things. He covers all of it and very deftly, balancing interesting thoughts and poetic imagery. I was really impressed with how all this comes together very nicely. There's a confessional element to a lot of this. It's deeply personal, as I can tell, whether it's reflective of his personal experience or his observations or maybe a mix of both. I don't know, but he scores high. This is getting a 5 from me for intellectual. Moving on to innovative. Okay, so sort of like Royal Sorrow, nothing I would say that jumps out at me as incredibly new here. I would say at various times we've heard these elements within Lunatic Soul and Riverside before, the elements of these songs, not necessarily in the exact way or the exact proportions, but that's all been there. It's all been part of his palette that he has been using all these years. And he's just doing something a little bit different here. There are parts of it that are ambient, electronic, acoustic, aggressive. You hear influences here and there of Pink Floyd and Peter Gabriel, maybe even a little Steven Wilson here and there, but a lot of things. He brings a lot of diverse influences and styles into the mix here and makes it into something that is uniquely Mariusz Duda, uniquely Lunatic Soul, however you want to say it. Something about it this time around, even though those elements are things we've heard in his various projects before, something about this one feels a little fresher to me, I think, than the last few. That could be my imagination. Maybe that's the mood I'm in. But there's something that feels a little fresher. There's something about it that worms its way into my brain a little bit more and sticks with me while feeling somehow a little bit familiar at the same time. I'm just not sure what it is. Maybe it's the way he balances out these diverse elements, and it just struck what was a very solid balance for me. Now, all that complimentary stuff aside, it's not incredibly new. He hasn't broken open the barriers of prog and gone into some new territory altogether, but I dig it. I'm giving it a score of 3.25. Moving on to technical. Now, at times it can be easy to forget or maybe take for granted just how accomplished a musician Mariusz is. He plays everything on this album, except for what the handful of guests cover, but he's doing this by himself. This is his project. He's been working on it for years, but it's all there. Most of it is restrained because that's what the music is. Again, there's these ambient periods, there's looping electronics type stuff. There's definitely some heavy riffing in there at times, but then he'll also throw in these impressive bass runs and these nice guitar licks, and they really impress when he does it. I think the fact that they're not present throughout the album and they're counterbalanced against these more, shall I say, mechanical things, is nice. It's that humanity along with that electronic part that really, I think, is, again, he did a great job of balancing the diverse elements of this album. It's not meant to be a showy album. This is not about noodling. This is not about big-time soloing. It's about mood. It's about atmosphere. It's about composition. But overall, I'm going to give him a 4 on this one. This is a very nicely played album. And then finally, last category, emotional. Again, I think not for me necessarily a massively emotional album through most of the run. It tends to lean more to the brain than it does to the heart. There are definitely, though, some very beautiful, plaintive passages filled with emotive vocals that just drip in regret and pleading and sorrow and longing. He's really dug into his higher register quite a bit, falsetto at times, that is a bit of a change up from what you typically expect to hear from him. And it sounds just really nice. And there are parts of it that just have this sense of something bigger, something grander on an emotional level that I really like. At the same time, some of those more electronic and ambient passages for me can leave one feeling a bit cold. I think I used the word mechanical, and that fits a bit. You know, for me, those kinds of things just don't pull up the emotional components. But when he then does kick into the emotion, I think it almost, the contrast enhances those emotional highs just a little bit. So I'm going to give him a score of a 3.5 on this one. It doesn't, like most albums this year, hasn't hit my high register for the emotional component. I don't know that it's exactly an emotional album, but there is a warmth to it, and there's a wistfulness to it that I think really, I think, helped make it stick in my head, and I think maybe part of the reason why it did. So while that score may not seem impressive, I think it went a long way towards a greater whole, a whole that's greater than the sum of its parts, basically, if I can coin a phrase there. So when you put all of that together and we go back and review, we've got what? We've got 5 on the intellectual, we've got 3.25 on the innovative, 4 on the technical, and 3.5 on the emotional. That gives us a raw score of 3.94. So, other thoughts on this? This to me was definitely a grower. The best parts of it stick with you immediately, almost feel familiar in some ways, and I don't mean to suggest that he's redoing his own stuff or taken from somebody else. It just kind of immediately felt comfortable despite not knowing it. And that created space for the other parts that weren't as immediately accessible to me to grow on me. So there's a lot of this that just kind of grows and built over time. And it's definitely an album that for me rewarded repeat listenings. Or maybe it repeated reward listenings. You decide how you want to handle that. The instrumental parts didn't always work as well for me as maybe would have been great. At times they felt a little overlong. Maybe I would have chopped them back a little bit. It's a very long album, but it doesn't really feel like it's a really, really long album either at the same time, I have to say. It does feel very much like a journey, but not one that seems overly expansive. But at the same time, a little trim here and there, and a little bit of shortening wouldn't have hurt it terribly in my mind. But the balance between wistfulness and aggressive passages is really nice here. Neither one of them really get the upper hand on the other. There's not one that takes over. It's as you get comfortable in one quieter area, it builds up to something else. Just a nicely paced album. I think a nicely balanced album in many ways. And I like, this is peak Marius Duda that we're hearing right here. For me, the standouts, kind of tough to pick because there's a lot of solid stuff on this. But if I'm going to pick 3, one, Monster stood out for me pretty well. The mechanical riffs, the tribal rhythms that are in there, quite hypnotic and aggressive. And it just, for me, was tapping into that part of me that really enjoys my prog edgy and rough. The Prophecy also, a majestic and an atmospheric song that really, I think, was a high point in the middle of the album, and it was a nice follow-up to Monster. They're back-to-back. And then finally, later on the album, Self in Distorted Glass. And I dug this one with its industrial slow burn build into then these pounding riffs before it finally fades out with a very gentle piano. It's a nice kind of a journey of a song, where you start at a point, you can kind of feel like you've gotten somewhere, and then you end up somewhere else, and then it's over. And I like that. That's how I like my prog. So, very, very solid album. And looking where it lands on my list of albums I've reviewed this year, I feel it fits very nicely with the score I gave it. So that 3.94, that raw score, doesn't need anything added or subtracted. This is a good, solid album. And I think absolutely a standout in his catalog, especially with Lunatic Soul. Stands out a good bit too among the Riverside stuff. So if you like Riverside, if you like Lunatic Soul, I don't see any reason why you wouldn't like this album just as much as any of the other ones, and maybe put it up there pretty high in your list of them. Just my thinking anyway. What do the rest of you think? I kind of blew through these pretty quickly, 2 albums. Not sure if that's something folks enjoy or not, or would rather I slow down. Also, I got more stuff coming up. I won't blow through all those as quickly as I did through these. But meanwhile, what do you think? These albums are both out now. They're available to be heard. Have you checked them out? Have you listened to them? What do you think? How do they compare? How does Lunatic Soul compare within the Lunatic Soul catalog? And maybe even if you want to compare it to Riverside, I suppose that's valid. Innerdeeps, where do you put them? How do you think of them as a new band this year? Are they one of the top debuts of the year, in your opinion? Or are they something else? Are you confused like me? Don't be confused like me. It's not worth it. Anyway, that's all I have for you for now. If you could take a moment and like and subscribe if you enjoy what I do, that would be great. Meanwhile, I leave you with the reminder to never fear to deviate from the norm. And as always, keep it proggy.